Let's get more now on the supposedly new government plans to change deportation rules, which will make it easier to remove foreign criminals who commit crimes in the UK. I'll chat to Trevor Phillips about it in a second, but speaking to him earlier this morning, the Home Secretary said the new plans to tackle immigration will see 50,000 fewer visas issued this year alone.
You're right that there can be international barriers and there can be international problems, but that's not the only issue. So where we have those international issues, then we engage repeatedly, persistently, in a determined way, because we do think that people should return home if they break our laws. But what we also need to do is to make sure that a wider range of people are actually being returned in the first place, because at the moment, the Home Office only takes action on the cases that have been into the prison system, including cases that have been in prison for more than a year. Actually, there are a lot of other people who are committing repeated offences that the Home Office isn't even notified about. So we need to change those rules, because if you come to the UK, you should abide by the law.
The Home Secretary was talking to Trevor Phillips. Trevor joins me now. Good to see you, as always. We're never that far away, Trevor, are we, from talking about immigration and tweaks to the rules and this kind of thing, and the government themselves putting it back on the agenda in the week to come. Why?
Well, by the way, Matt, good to talk to you. Did I detect a mild note of scepticism when you said the supposedly new plans for immigration?
Well, I'm not sceptical, but I felt like I heard some of this stuff before.
Well, that's quite plausibly because you have. And funnily enough, you heard it from virtually every single party. Everybody's going to clamp down, everybody's going to reduce immigration, everybody's got new proposals, and they're always different to the last set of proposals from another party or even from your own party. Obviously, this has been on the government agenda for a while, but it's hard to escape the suspicion that things have been accelerated a bit because of the extraordinary success of the Reform Party, not just at the local elections a week and a half ago, but generally its movement in the polls. We've been showing this morning that the average of the last 10 polls has Reform 5 points plus ahead of Labour. I mean, 3 months ago when we were talking, I don't think either of us could have imagined that was happening. So something important is taking place here, and I think this is the government's response to it.
Yes, because 1 week ago, of course, we were talking about Reform trouncing both Labour and especially the Tories in the previous week's local elections in some parts of England. Richard Tice from Reform UK obviously thinks this is all to do with them. Let's have a listen.
Putin is an evil aggressor who has to be stopped. What world leaders are trying to do is to find a way to get to a lasting ceasefire, and we should all welcome that.
Yeah, but you're doing what you always try to do to me, which is to answer your own question. Has he changed his mind about Putin being a man he admires and that the Russian...
Nigel is crystal clear that Putin is the aggressor and we have got to get to a ceasefire. It's as simple as that.
Not quite what I thought he was going to talk about, Trevor. Nonetheless, Richard Tice talking about the situation in Ukraine, which we'll get to in a second. In some ways, look, you can see why he would want to do that, to appear more statesman-like the party is more than just thinking about a couple of themes and policies, wanting to, well, make a noise on the global stage too.
No, but you're 100% right. I mean, he was answering a question I'd asked him about whether Nigel Farage has changed his view about Putin, who he had said he admired, and Richard Tice was basically saying, you're not going to get me on that one. We accept that Putin is the aggressor and so on. And the thing that then struck me in the interview that we did with Richard Tice is how much like a conventional politician he's beginning to sound, that he is actually not going to allow any sort of strange, extraneous comments that the leader might have made a year ago to detract from, number one, Reform takes a victory lap. Number two, Reform marks out its position as the leading party in aggression on immigration. And he basically did that, but he didn't actually tell me, in spite of all my efforts, how they were going to do any of this. And in a way, if you played his interview and Yvette Cooper's interview, what you would have heard is two politicians essentially telling everybody, don't worry, leave it with us, we're going to sort this immigration thing out. Don't bother asking us how we're going to do it, but just trust us.
The proof of the pudding's in the eating, though, isn't it? I think you pointed out, Trevor, to Yvette Cooper, there have been 10,000 people crossing the Channel so far this year. That's happened sooner in the year than previous years. No one seems to be able to get a handle on it properly.
Well, to be fair to her, she has now come up with, I almost said a new wheeze, that would be disrespectful, but she's come up with a new proposition, and it'd be interesting to see if this works. The French, as you will recall, Matt, because I think you reported on it, our reporters saw people getting into boats on the French coast and French police standing on the beach no more than maybe 50 or 60 feet away, doing absolutely nothing. Now, the French claim this is because their law wouldn't allow their police to do it. And what Yvette Cooper told us this morning is that she now has a deal with the French in which they're going to change their law, and that means that their border force, their equivalent of our border force, is going to be able to get into the water and stop those boats leaving Calais. I think many people would say, I'll believe that when I see it happen. But I think that was new this morning.
Talking of deals with other countries, look, a week is a long time in politics. Trying to put those local elections behind them, Labour have struck not one but two deals on the global stage this week with both India and the US. Details seem relatively scant at this point in time. We had Keir Starmer incredibly taking a live phone call with Donald Trump, with everyone else watching, which is incredible choreography earlier in the week. And he proclaimed it to be historic, whereas Kemi Badenoch said Britain had been shafted. Where on that spectrum of success do you think it is?
Well, I think I would probably take the consensus of our panel of Fraser Nelson and Sonia Soda and Mark Urban this morning, which is that, in truth, neither deal is that big a deal. But the fact that there is a deal is politically significant and has given the Prime Minister the opportunity to say, look at us, look how special we are, we're getting on with it. Will it make a huge difference? Probably not. And as you will have heard, the Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz told me that, in truth, deal with Donald Trump, quote, not worth the paper it's written on. And both the scale of the Indian deal and the American deal are really quite small. And he says, really, where we ought to be turning our gaze is towards Europe and making a deal with the EU. Problem the government's got is, on certain things, food standards, some aspect of digital economy, it is impossible to reconcile the standards of the EU with the American standards, and the government's going to have to choose. This deal, so far, has avoided that, basically by not making a deal in those sectors. But at some point, we're going to have to choose.
We've come full circle, Trevor, because one of the details of the Indian deal that people focused on was the government saying that for a certain amount of time, Indian workers working in Britain will not be paying national insurance. The logic being is they're not going to get the benefit of paying national insurance necessarily. But that then prompts, when we come full circle, the likes of Nigel Farage to say, hang on a minute, you're prioritising Indian workers over British workers.
Well, I think that's kind of a good political slogan. In truth, it's not that significant. This is pretty common, par for the course. I would say that probably the more significant issue is what Yvette Cooper told me this morning, which, to be honest, I almost missed because she sort of slipped it out in an answer, but it's very significant, that she seemed to suggest that they plan to abolish the health and social care visas. Now, what the Conservatives had done was stop people coming in those visas, bringing their dependents. Yvette Cooper seemed to hint this morning that they were going to go all together. And my colleagues on the team here think that that means something like 30,000 visas that would otherwise have been issued won't be issued. Why does that matter? Because they're in a sector which is already 150,000 short of workers. And there is the government's big dilemma. Rachel Reeves wants growth. In order to produce growth and to make it work, you've got to have people. You've got to have workers. Yvette Cooper says we need fewer immigrants. To have fewer immigrants, you're going to have fewer workers. I don't think thus far, unless they pull some massive rabbit out of the hat this week, they have yet decided what they want to do on that and how they're going to solve that dilemma.
But whether it contributes to the economic growth or not, we'll have to wait and see. When it comes to my personal growth, talking to you every Sunday morning really does help, Trevor. Always a pleasure. Good to see you.
By the way, I'm just going to say congratulations on the league. We're coming for you next year.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing Arsenal applauding Liverpool out at Anfield, before then losing to Liverpool at Anfield later on. I'll text you later about that one, Trev. Good to see you.